Unit 9, Civil Rights. Let's talk about access to rights and civic participation and the role of leaders in achieving change. Civil rights, what are they? Simply the rights of a citizen. Your rights in the Bill of Rights, your rights guaranteed by the Declaration of Independence. The reason we created a government. The government has one job. All the other stuff that we're used to the government doing, really not their job. The only job the government has is to protect our rights. Unfortunately, throughout history, the government has not protected the rights of some of our citizens. After slavery ends in the Civil War, we get the 13th Amendment, which ends slavery. The 14th Amendment, which we'll focus a lot on today, it grants former slaves citizenship, which means they have rights. And the bigger part of that is the Equal Protection Clause. We'll get to that in a second. And the 15th Amendment gives black males the right to vote. So if we go into the 14th Amendment, we look at one specific clause called the Equal Protection Clause. So states cannot deny to any person within its jurisdiction, or a state cannot deny any person living in the state equal protection of the law. The state governments must treat all of their citizens equal. This is written in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, so every state has to follow it. That's going to set up the civil rights movement, because throughout the 20th century and the 19th century, the state governments were not treating Black Americans or African Americans equally. They were not giving them equal protection of the law. They were giving white Americans all the protections of the law, and then Black Americans were only getting some of the protections of the law. You can't do that. Everyone has to follow the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, so there'll be protests, there will be court cases to make sure that state governments and local governments are giving everyone equal protection of the law. First big case that we study is Plessy versus Ferguson. The railroad car is segregated. There is a black car, a black male car, a white man car, a white woman car. So there's all these separate railroad cars for all the different groups of people. And the Supreme Court will say, that's fine. You can keep doing that. We don't have any problem. As long as you treat everybody equal, as long as everyone gets to ride, as long as everybody gets to where you're going, it doesn't matter if they're riding in the first car, or the last car, or the middle car, or whatever car, as long as everyone gets to ride, it's fine. That's what the government, our government, who's often the problem here, the government says, hey, racism's cool. The strange thing here was the railroad company didn't want this. Imagine you're a railroad company. You've got to have a car for white men, white women, black women, Asian men, Asian women, Hispanic men, Hispanic women. How many railroad cars do I need? I got 2 people on this car. I got 3 people on this car. This car is full, but why do I need all these cars? I can fit everybody onto 2 cars. You're forcing the railroad to spend a lot more money than they need because of racism. Often the case. Businesses don't want to be racist. Think of it. Let's give an example. Pretend that you're running a business. You have a restaurant. And the government tells you, you got to follow racist policy. You got to have a separate bathroom. What do you mean? Well, what the government wants you to do is, I need a white male bathroom, a white female bathroom, a black male bathroom, a black female bathroom. This is the government by law making you do this. So you have to build 4 bathrooms in your restaurant. You have to plumb for 4 restaurants, and you got to clean 4 different bathrooms every hour or every 2 hours. That's expensive. It costs a lot of money for you to be racist. You probably don't want to do that. Think of it this way as well. A black customer comes in. You would serve them. Why would you turn them away? If you are racist and you run a restaurant and you refuse to serve people based on the color of their skin, those are customers that you lose. A black male, a black female, a white female spend money exactly the same. A dollar bill is still green. Their money is the same. If you are racist, you're going to lose sales. You're not going to make money. It's stupid. Often, the reason that railroads were racist was because they were forced to be racist by the government. Often, the reason we saw these signs in stores, sure, there were racist people and there were racist business owners. I'm not saying that, oh, no, it was completely the government's fault. But in some of these cases, it was the government forcing the stores to be racist. They didn't want to do it. They were forcing them to do it. Now, again, I'm not apologizing for anybody who was racist. There were plenty of racist people. But just think of it from your own perspective. Would you choose to be racist? You're going to go out of business pretty quickly. That's the way that would work. A lot of stuff on the screen, right? Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution says that the states The state government gets to write the rules when it comes to voting. And so the state governments were deciding to create literacy tests that were unfair, that were tricky, that were very challenging, and they were basically denying Black Americans their civil rights, their right to vote. Again, it's the government's doing this. Yes, there were racist people, but when you look through American history and we're thinking about a racist past, remember, it's the governments that are creating these racist laws. The government that's creating a law that says separate but equal. That's the government. That's not people choosing to do it. That's not some racist neighbor choosing. It's the government forcing people to be racist by law. It's the government's writing Jim Crow laws that say, yes, we will discriminate. It's the governments that are doing this. Great Migration, African Americans will leave the South because of racism, but then they're going to go to the North and find the same racism there. But mainly they're leaving because of sharecropping is basically the new form of slavery, so they'll leave for factory jobs in the North. In the South, you have de jure segregation, which is segregation by law. It's written. It's on the books. You live here, you live there. You go to this school, you go to that school. It's by law. You still have segregation in the North. It's just de facto segregation. It's just not written down. It's just a matter of living. There's no law that says blacks have to go to the black school, but it's just the way that it is. There's no law that says blacks live on this side of town. It's just the way that it is. And if you tried to live on the white side of town, you would be denied that access. No law, but it was still the same thing, segregation throughout the country. Booker T. Washington versus W.E.B. Du Bois. And let's not say versus. We often say, oh, they're against each other. No, they had conflicting viewpoints, but they're not villains, or they're not enemies. They have an amicable relationship. We often want to put them against each other. Yeah, they have opposing views, and that Booker T. Washington thinks that we can achieve equality through education. Education leads to jobs, and then jobs lead to upward mobility in society, and thus African Americans are proving to white America that we are equal. We're all equal, and so then we'll all be accepted and we'll all achieve equality. W.E.B. Du Bois says, no. We all know we're equal. We all know science says that we're equal. We know that the Declaration of Independence says that we're supposed to be equal. We know the 14th Amendment says that we're supposed to be protected as equals. We shouldn't have to prove. We don't need to get an education and get jobs and work for 25 more years to prove that we're equal. We need it now. We want it now. We're going to create political organizations to achieve this. We're going to pass laws that will achieve this. We're going to protest until the laws protect us. So you have a political activism perspective with W.E.B. Du Bois, and then you have a Booker T. Washington, which is a more long game of education, training. Both valid points. Both have excellent books. Up from Slavery, The Souls of Black Folk. Read them both, please. World War II. A. Philip Randolph, one of the greatest civil rights leaders that does not get enough credit. Executive Order 8802, the weapons industry. Remember, we're making weapons for World War II. Well, those jobs, those factories were only employing white people. Black people were being discriminated against and denied access to jobs in the factory. So A. Philip Randolph says to President FDR, stop being racist. If you don't end this racist policy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, if you don't end this racist policy, 50,000 Black Americans are going to protest in Washington, D.C. So you need to get rid of your racist policy and allow equal access to these factory jobs. And so Franklin Delano Roosevelt does the right thing finally and decides, no, Black people and white people can work in the war industry. Next thing that A. Philip Randolph achieves is that we integrate the military. Executive Order 9981 under President Truman. Randolph gets Truman to integrate the military. No more Black battalions and white battalions. Black and white men will fight side by side. Now, beyond just that that's the right thing to do, this has a huge impact. When Black men and white men are fighting together, protecting each other, saving each other's lives, it proves that they are equal. So imagine you're a racist white soldier and a Black male saves your life. You realize, hey, that racism stuff, it's kind of stupid. This guy is just as strong, just as fast, just as intelligent as I am. And he should be treated equally. This opens a lot of eyes. This opens a lot of minds when you're fighting side by side with someone. It shouldn't have to happen. We should have treated Black Americans equal from the beginning. They haven't. We haven't. But this is a great way in moving forward and getting there. Another Jackie Robinson, baseball. He proves his expert athletic prowess. He proves that Black Americans are just as good as white Americans, just as intelligent, just as athletic. We shouldn't have had to do this, but this is what happened. We shouldn't have made African Americans prove their worth. We shouldn't have made it this way. But Black Americans didn't quit. They didn't give up. They persisted. And they continued to fight and prove that all men are created equal. And slowly but surely, we got it through our stiff heads, our thick minds that, yeah, we are all equal and the government needs to end these racist policies. Brown versus the Board of Education. Linda Brown was denied access to the white school, forced to go across town to the black school. Now, it's not just Linda Brown, it's other girls and boys, but Linda Brown gets her name on the court case because, why did we choose Linda Brown? Because alphabetically her name came first. So here's the lesson, kids. Name your child. Well, you can't really change the last name, but if you could, give them a last name with a alphabetical A, B, or C. So with the help of lawyer Thurgood Marshall and NAACP, we will sue Brown will sue the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And this court case will go all the way to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will rule, you know what, that Plessy versus Ferguson, we got to throw that out. Separate but equal, it's not cool. The 14th Amendment says that the states must protect everyone and treat everyone equally, and we are not treating Linda Brown, we are not treating these students equally by forcing them to go to a black school. Separate but equal doesn't add up. Here's how the reasoning works. Now, some people, no one's going to really argue this, but here's your devil's advocate of, no, it's equal. Like, let's follow the Plessy versus Ferguson line of separate but equal. Look, she still gets to go to school. She still gets equal access to an education. 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4. All the education, the books are still the same. It's equal. And that's a tough argument to win. And they'll argue, well, there's not enough resources. Well, the Supreme Court doesn't want to hear that. They want to say, look, you still get an education. But Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP understand that. And they know they've got to kind of find a way to get this thing through. We got to find a way to prove that Linda Brown is not being treated equal. Just going to a school, we got to go further. We're not going to win that argument. We're not going to win the argument saying that, no, well, this school's not quite as good. He goes further. Thurgood Marshall and NAACP will argue that by separating the student, it has a psychological effect. By telling a student that they cannot go to this school, that they will interpret that as, well, I'm not good enough. So when you tell a black student that they can't go to the white school, they interpret it as, well, I'm not good enough. And if I'm not good enough, then why study at all? And so this policy is having disparate impacts. This policy is having an impact that's actually resulting in inequality. And so the Supreme Court will say, oh, okay, all right. That makes sense. So separate but equal doesn't really work. Now, it's based on the work of Kenneth Clark. What Kenneth Clark will do is he'll have a segregated student have to choose between a white doll and a black doll. And a segregated student, the student has been separated. The student has been told that they cannot go to the white school. They will often prefer the white doll and say that the black doll is bad. And so the argument that Kenneth Clark will make, that then Thurgood Marshall will use in the court case of Brown versus the Board of Education, is that when you segregate a student, they then feel inferior. And if they feel inferior, they're not going to work as hard, they're not going to get an education. But this policy, this law the government is making by separating, it's making a student inferior. It's making them feel bad about themselves. So the state is not treating that student equally. Well, the problem with that was Kenneth Clark also, so he's like, segregation, negative psychological effect. So Marshall will argue that, the Supreme Court will hear it, and they win the court case. Cool, it makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily, because he also gave this study to students who were integrated, students who were not forced to go to different schools, students that were not segregated. And those students who went to schools with white students, well, they also preferred the white doll and didn't like the black doll. So, look, this is bad, possibly. There's some sort of impact that's happening, but it's not segregation that's doing it, right? The variable is not segregated schools. If they both prefer this doll, it's something else. It's a racist society. It's something else, but it's not separate. It's not separation. So if you look at that, you say, well, maybe we shouldn't have ruled separate but equal. No, separate but equal. We needed to end segregation. Segregation was wrong, but the reason that we used to get there, that was bad science. So they just kind of ignore that, and that's never taught in your AP history book. So bad science in segregation. So it's good that we don't have a segregated society. It's good that we are a step closer to equality, but it's not that good that we used bad science to get there. Now, Marxists, progressives, leftists, and Saul Alinsky will believe, look, the end justifies the means. Ending segregation no matter what. Ending inequality no matter what. And I'm with you. Ending equality is important. Ending segregation is important. Having rights for all citizens is important. But I may not be with you in doing whatever it takes. I don't want to lie to people to get to the end. I don't want to make stuff up to get to the ends that I want. But, it's up to you to decide. Lying, cheating, stealing, bribing, extorting, coercing, anything is fair game as long as you reach your virtuous goal. I don't know if I'm right there with you. I think this is, it's good in the end. We ended segregation. Brown versus the Board of Education, it's the right thing to do. It was the right decision. how we got there with bad science. I don't know if I want to repeat that. It's fine. Now, in the future, when we make changes, let's probably not lie about stuff. Let's not mislead people. Let's get there the right way. But hey, it's up for you to decide. A lot of states still do not want to integrate after the Brown versus the Board decision. And if they do, they're going to take their own time. Little Rock 9 is the first example of, all right, let's test this out. So separate but equal is thrown out. So let's integrate schools. Little Rock 9, these 9 students will be integrated into Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we will start the process of integration, and Arkansas will fight against this because there is a lot of racism in the South. There's a lot of racism in the state governments in the South. And so they will fight and fight and fight. Eventually, the federal government will force the state governments to follow this because that's how federalism works. Federal government has more power than the state government. So your state can say, no, we want to be racist all they want. It doesn't matter. When the federal government tells you to stop being racist, you stop being racist. And the Little Rock 9 attend school for a year, and we get integration. And the Little Rock 9 are actually, these girls and boys are escorted to school every day by the military because it's, I mean, you can look at these pictures. This is how crazy the times were. When we think about, yes, we have racism today. We have problems with race today that we need to work on. But black children are not escorted to school by the National Guard every day with guns to protect them. Our schools are integrated and they are equal. And we have made an amazing step forward. We have ways to go, but this is not the way that it is today. Thank God. And then unfortunately, what will happen at the end of the year, Arkansas will just close all the schools. Instead of Arkansas integrating all the schools, we've integrated the central school in Little Rock. But instead of Arkansas integrating all their schools and letting all the black children and all the white children go to school together, what Arkansas will do is close all their schools. Say, well, we can integrate or we'll just get rid of all of our schools. Unbelievable. Unbelievable stuff. See you in video 2.